Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, DataBank is hosting this webinar today. My name is Christian, and I'm the Events and Sponsorship Manager for DataBank. I am so excited to welcome you. Today, our Chief Information Security Officer, Mark Haupt, will be speaking to you about ransomware and the importance of protecting your data. At the end, we'll be opening up to a live Q&A session with Mark, so please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions that you might have. It should be a very informative session. We're very excited for you to join us, and I'll turn it over to Mark so he can introduce himself, and we'll go ahead and get started. All you, Mark.
All right. Thank you very much, Christian. My name is Mark Haupt, and I am the Chief Information Security Officer at DataBank. I've been with DataBank for about 6.5 years and have about 30 years of experience overall inside of the security environment. I've been both CTO and CISO in multiple companies, including inside of Fortune 500 companies and other types of financial institutions and academic environments. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you today a little bit about ransomware and how to detect, prevent, and reduce ransomware. I know that that's at the top of everybody's list after the last 2 months, and especially if you live in the southeast of the United States, where you were personally impacted by the fuel shortages and other situations that have occurred in that period of time. I'm sure that it's more than on the top of your list. It is a close reminder that ransomware can have a significant impact upon our lives. What a lot of people don't realize is how long ransomware has been around. And so that's one of the things that we're going to discuss and is a key to understanding exactly how to defeat and detect and even reduce the impacts of ransomware. So we're going to talk about exactly what is ransomware, because I think there's also some misunderstandings of what ransomware is. We're going to talk about some of the latest trends, how to detect and defeat it, because it is defeatable, even though a lot of people would have you believe otherwise. Then we're going to talk about the current variations of it and other pieces, including compliance impacts of ransomware, which is a lot of things, a lot of situations that people don't talk about is the actual compliance impacts of ransomware. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So I just want you to know, starting off, I like to make sure that you understand that the point is here that it is not something new. Ransomware is not new, but it is rapidly evolving to a certain degree. And actually, the part that's rapidly evolving over the past few years are the targets of ransomware as they move from industry to industry. So ransomware defense is something that we can do. It is something that we can tackle. And I think at the end of this conversation, you're going to realize that when someone is hit by ransomware, it's probably because there is I don't want to necessarily say failure, but there's been a degradation of the security controls that have been put in place, because in essence, defending against ransomware can be done, and it can be done with good security hygiene. So I want you to ask yourself, have you ever in your organization before May, whenever it became a household item because of the fuel shortages and other ransomware attacks that have occurred recently, have you ever deliberately inside of your company or inside of your home or other life, your social environments, perhaps your church or even other types of events like scouting or something non-for-profit, have you ever deliberately done a qualitative or quantitative analysis of how ransomware would impact your organization? I believe that if we took a poll and had people raise their hands, we would find that very few people have done it. And if they've done it, they may have done it at a point in time, but don't do it repeatedly and don't do it enough to understand what that impact will be. And I will even venture to bet that it's the impacts upon your personal life and impacts upon your social life, if you will, those areas where you volunteer your time with different groups like the Scouts or the church or something like that, where you probably have never even considered doing a risk analysis inside those environments. So let's talk about those two words really quickly, about qualitative and quantitative risk analysis and how to apply those towards a situation like ransomware. So qualitative risk analysis is a non-fact based, it's more of a It's more of taking a lot of pieces of evidence that might come together and give you a supposition, if you will. Whereas quantitative risk analysis is the type of situation where you have hard factual data. So in a ransomware type of situation, you might be able to say you have hard factual data that there's a risk of being attacked based upon the number of attacks that have happened in the industry in which you're doing your analysis on. Whereas a qualitative analysis might be a situation where you say, there's a lot of ransomware out there in the world right now, and we are doing or not doing certain security features within our organization in order to protect against it. So I don't want to go so far as to say qualitative is a gut feel, because it's not, but it is a whole bunch of pieces of evidence that come together that give you that qualitative supposition, if you will, that qualitative analysis to tell you whether you might be at significant risk or not. So you may have multiple pieces of non-quantifiable data that come together to do that. So if you have not deliberately done a risk analysis on your organization, now is the time to do it. And I'm telling you that all types of organizations are contacting me and others like me inside of the security industry and saying, how do I do this? And I now need to do it. Every type of organization. You notice I've said those that are in your social circles, your volunteer type of situations, the smaller businesses, they are now really starting to pay attention and take note of the impact that ransomware can have, even if the ransomware doesn't happen inside of the four walls of that organization. So now is the time to take a stock, if you will, of what is that analysis, so you understand how it will impact you. So a ransomware story, one that you may not have heard from the news, and I'm going to make sure that the names are changed to protect the guilty and the innocent. But let me just tell you very quickly a ransomware story that has impacted someone that I know. So about 10 months ago, right in the middle of COVID, when these situations or this situation started occurring, an individual that I'm aware of and his business became what he believed impacted by ransomware. And as that computer that he got the pop-up message on indicated he was attacked, he thought that he pulled the plug on it, did all the defensive mechanisms that I told him to be prepared for, and thought that he had prevented the attack from occurring. But then about 4 months later, it happened again, but this time it happened in the middle of the night. It was much more crafty and it was much more damaging, because when he arrived at work the next morning, he found all of his computers on his network had been impacted by ransomware. And when we did the analysis, the forensic analysis, to try and find out exactly what happened, to cut a long story short, what we found out was that first attack that occurred about 10 months ago actually was a little bit of a obfuscation, if you will. It really took him down a path, really, of thinking that he had fixed the problem. He had defeated the folks that were trying to attack him. And actually what they did was they placed a time bomb type of ransomware on his computer at that time. So his defenses were down after he knew that he was able to tackle the situation effectively. And then he came in that time period a few months later and found all of his computers were ransomware. Luckily for him, he had listened to some of the advice that I'm going to share with you today, and he was able to get back up online within 4 hours with all of his critical systems, because he had followed the backup suggestions and the other targeted type of solutions that can be provided in order to get back up online. And this is the story that is the case with many companies out there that are heeding the warnings that we talk about here. On the flip side of that, again, not to rake anybody over the coals, but I've seen businesses go out of business because their data is completely unavailable, and they've had to post notes on their door and say, "I'm sorry, but we can no longer service you or help you." So that is the difference between being prepared and not being prepared in a ransomware story. So a couple of insights and current perceptions that are on ransomware is that Cybersecurity technology and mitigation is the top of the list for future investment allocations regarding ransomware defenses. That is something that is a current insight and perception, but I'm here to tell you that it's not just the technology that will mitigate these problems. It is also the training that goes into effect to letting your people know how to deal with the situation very quickly and very resolutely when they believe that they are being attacked by ransomware. Not only training to do that, but actually to prevent that. So it is truly a situation where a combination of people, processes, and technologies are what is going to defend our environments from these ransomware situations. And of all the top 10 risks of economic growth right now, and as we've seen with the pipeline situation, the fuel supplies, data theft and cyber attacks are the only two that individual companies can take steps to address directly. And ransomware falls inside of both those data theft and cyber attack type of situations. So all the other things that are at our economy is at risk to, that will possibly damage our economy, are things that that companies have to just kind of surf the environment with. For example, a downturn in supply. You know, we're seeing that right now because of the COVID situation. Or on the flip side of that, an upturn in inflation. A company cannot individually impact those types of situations, but they can impact a data theft or a cyber attack type of situation. They do have control over that, and therefore they can impact their own economic growth and the country's economic growth by implementing the tools, techniques, and the people to prevent these types of attacks from happening. So out of those top 10 risks to economic growth, data theft and cyber attacks are the two that we can handle and work together to deal with. Some of the trends that are going on inside of ransomware. See, you know, I told you earlier that ransomware is something that is not new. It is something that has been around for a while. And once I tell you here that ransomware has been around since 2005, or particularly, you know, possibly even before that, things will start to gel and come into play. Many of you will remember that back in the early 2000s, one of the biggest forms of junk email coming in were these pharma emails. These pharma emails then would tell, you know, give you the opportunity to buy pharmaceuticals from overseas, and you know, if you bought them, you'll get them at cheaper costs. Well, really, that was the source, the birth, if you will, of ransomware, because through that, the ransomware attackers have learned how to communicate with people, how to manipulate people, and how to get into their lives and into their computers in order to have attacks. So from that pharma situation between 2005 and 2010, there were a lot of attacks against home users, against especially the elderly people. You would get those pop-up messages. If you're one of the people that's done IT support, your parents may have called you up, or some grandparent may have called you up and said, "Hey, my computer says I need to call the FBI." This is exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about here, where it developed out of those pharma type of phishing emails and scams that went on. Between 2010 and 2015, these folks then saw a gold mine of money coming into them because people were paying the $25 or the $50 to get the encryption key, to get that FBI message to go away from their computer screen and gain access to their pictures and their financial data and other things that were on their home systems. So between 2010 and 2015, knowing that people were willing to pay that at home, the attackers upped the ante and decided to attack the small business guys out there, the people who are trying really hard to make a dollar while they're running their business and running 100 different other things at the same time, and not paying attention to the security of their computing systems. So again, that was big dollars for these people because they upped the number to, hey, pay me $100. And then over a couple of years, it became $500 and $1,000. And a good small business CEO would know that, hey, I can get my problem resolved with $1,000 or even $500 or even $100. It would cost a lot less to do that than to call in some IT support guy who's going to tell me, well, you've been hacked and there's not much I can do for you. So there was a lot of money coming into these folks between those years. And so then they upped their ante in 2015 timeframe, roughly, and they started going after larger organizations, and they went after hospitals and other organizations like that. And then in 2019 began attacking state and local government and even law enforcement. We saw many times large cities like the city of Atlanta, the city of Baltimore were attacked by these ransomware situations. And what we've seen here in the recent couple of months is even upping the ante more by attacking the critical infrastructure like the pipelines. And this is not going to go away. The United States government believes that it's such a powerful tool for people who have ransomware attacking elements to be able to use that that they have now told critical infrastructures. President Biden has told critical infrastructure folks through the Department of Homeland Security that they have to report their security status and their health and hygiene of their security environments to the DHS on a routine basis starting here this summer in order to help prevent that. And that's a response to the Colonial Pipeline situation that we saw within the last couple of months. So these critical infrastructure situations are the targets, and we've seen other targets like the pipeline situation occur just in the past couple of weeks, as a matter of fact. We saw an attack against a critical meat supplier. And so it's very quickly spreading to large companies and companies that have large market shares inside of particular verticals, because with Colonial Pipeline, they paid the ransomware folks a number of $1 million in order to get that situation corrected and get it to go away. And as long as these companies are paying, they are going to continue to do their thing. So it is going to be happening. It's going to continue to happen, and you need to be prepared for it. So exactly what do you need to be prepared for? Well, here's Ransomware 101. So ransomware is nothing more than an old traditional computer malware type of virus that impacts your computer. And what it does, it typically kicks off one of two variants of types of this type of malware. One is called a crypto variant, and that's where it actually encrypts the data on your computer. And as you probably are aware, with encryption, it requires an encryption key. And if you don't have the key, you can't get to the data. So that's where they're making their money, is they're selling that crypto encryption key back to the person who is the victim of these types of situations. Another one is called a locker, where they are capable of locking down your computer, but not altering any of your system. No encryption is occurring, so your data is still there. You know it's there. In fact, they do it in such interesting and intriguing ways that you could actually see your data, but you can't gain access to your data. So it's almost as if that little piece of candy is sitting there right in front of you, but you can't quite reach it to get to it. And so these are the two types of variants within the ransomware. Now, there are a few other small ones as well, where people are more devious are using to attack, but these are the two key variants that are out there. And these things are nothing more than a computer virus in most cases. So another thing that we always want to know is the why. What is the motivating factor for using ransomware to get into these systems to have an impact upon these organizations? First of all, there's regular hackers out there that are just trying to disrupt you. There may be situations, and these are very closely tied to the hacktivists. There may be people out there who are just trying to attack your business because it's fun, because you're a target, because you're a name. Others that are hacktivists may have something against your business, so may have a social cause against your business. Perhaps your business is one that has come out in favor or against a particular social cause. The hacktivists may be attacking you to make you pay, quote unquote, for that type of activity that you are talking about in the open. So these are situations where you have to watch out for people who are deliberately trying to harm you. Cyber criminals are just after your money in most cases. So these are the folks that are going to, like we saw with Colonial Pipeline, where they actually issue an apology for attacking your environment. But, oh, by the way, give me the money and I'll make all this thing go away. There are many of the types of situations where you've seen that, where they've attacked hospitals and said, oops, I didn't really mean to do that, but give me the money and I'll make it all go away. I'll even help you get rid of it. So these are cyber criminals. And then there's nation state, or what we call advanced persistent threat actors out there. There are nations out there that are trying to use ransomware to cripple the infrastructure and cripple the interior situations in other countries out there. If you believe that we are not at war right now, I urge you to go and look at what is happening on the cyber front down deep under the covers. Our country and other countries are in a literal cyber war right now and attacking one another back and forth. So when I say that nation states are using ransomware to attack systems, I'm including the United States in that. Our people who are trained to do this are in fact attacking other countries out there, just like we are being attacked by them. So these are situations that are going to continue to escalate, and that is the reason that ransomware exists, is because people are getting money off of it, because people are having success with it, and because nation states are out there back and forth against one another, trying to harm each other within those efforts. So our ransomware 101 has been addressed. Our reason for doing ransomware has been addressed. So now we're going to start moving into the, how do you get infected on your systems? How do you get impacted? And this is where you really want to start taking some notes, because this is where the defense starts. So how do we get infected by ransomware? One of the tried and true methods is through phishing or spear phishing. Now, phishing, you're probably familiar with. They randomly send you an email with a link in it, or another type of embedded image that will start running on your computer as soon as you bring it into the open position. When you open up that email, and it will download some files, and it will start impacting your system right away. So that's one way to do it. Now, spear phishing is the same thing, only it's dedicated, directed at a particular individual. So phishing is whenever you blast it out, but spear phishing is when they're targeted at an individual. So lots of times your CEOs are the ones that are being targeted. Your chief financial officers and your finance teams are being targeted with spear phishing. Their names specifically are on a list somewhere, and these lists are sold around from one attacker to another, and an identifier as to whether they've been successful or not in the past is there as well. Another area where infections occur is on infected websites, where a website will download a file onto your computer and begin running once it's arrived at your computer. Drive-by downloading. This is where when an attacker will literally be like in a Starbucks or a coffee shop or something, and place a file onto a computer that's attached to the network. If you're on a plane, if you're out traveling in an airport, if you're in a coffee shop or restaurant or something, make sure that your computer is protected from this type of situation. Of course, social media is and web-based type of situations where you could send instant messaging. And we're all familiar with our social media accounts being hacked or getting these strange messages in our private message box. Watch out for those things, because they do exist. And then there's this piece of it that kind of goes along with the clicking on the exe files, is the deliberate placement of files. This is whenever you take multiple efforts to try and attack a system, and then you place that file onto that system. And typically it's a time bomb situation, like what I described my friend's ransomware situation that occurred when I was describing that story earlier. That was a deliberate placement of a file that would go off at a certain time later on. And then what happens there, it phones home and once the attack is beginning, it phones home and it lets the attackers know that is running. So that's how you get impacted. And so defending against all these types of situations, training your people to understand and know what phishing looks like, know what those private messages that shouldn't be coming in look like, having protections on your laptops when you're traveling, things like that are ways to defend against this type of situation. And that's where we then launch into what are our best practices. And you'll notice that looking on here, it goes beyond IT and it goes beyond the security team. What we're looking at here is we're looking at best practices from a security hygiene perspective. And one of the things that's on the top of the list, deliberately on the top of the list, is using and working with your HR and your marketing teams to have a culture within your company that identifies the training and awareness that needs to go into play in order to make people aware and protect against these types of situations. So this is where it becomes like a 3 or a 4-way team between your HR team, your marketing team, your internal culture team, and your security teams to all put together a training and awareness package that can be delivered to your people, and not just as a checkbox, but as a repeated reminder of watch out for the phishing, watch out for those private messages that are coming through that can be challenging, and potentially put things on your computers. Then we move into some of the IT things that we need to look at. You know, one of the biggest things, the biggest two things that people forget about, especially over the past year, has been patching and opening up computers with admin rights on them. So one of the biggest attack situations we saw once COVID started hitting about a year and a half ago, where people, IT professionals, were no longer in the office, and the companies were risk adverse to putting patches on systems for fear that the systems would go down and require a hands-on remediation in order to fix the problem. And so once that happened, and add on to the fact that there's a lot of kids that were home from high school or otherwise college and high school that had nothing better to do, so people were out there attacking systems that were unpatched, and they were also looking for systems that had administrator rights on the laptops, because then they can do anything they want at that point. So putting together a good hygiene package for your workstations, for your servers, all across the board, is a significant defense against these types of situations. So one of the other things I want to talk about here is hardening your systems. If you're not familiar with that term of hardening your systems, it means taking the systems and removing functions that are not needed on the system. So you could, for example, if you're running a laptop and that laptop does not need to have Telnet as part of it installed, you don't have somebody that's using Telnet, or you can use another tool for Telnet in order to manage systems, you should remove that function from that system. If you don't need a web browser on your server, which most servers should not need a web browser, then remove that web browser from your server, because it removes an entire avenue where somebody could be bored while they're waiting for patches to apply, or they're waiting for an upgrade to happen, from clicking on that browser and going to start browsing the internet, and then pulling down one of these ransomware things from a bad website. So if you don't need it, if it's really not needed on a system for any functionality, remove it. That's what you call hardening the system, removing all the unneeded things. So then we move into some of the security tools that could be used to protect systems as well. So one of the things that we use quite consistently is doing continuous monitoring and scanning our systems for the patches that don't exist, for the loopholes that exist in the systems, and then we could go and fix those. We do scanning on a monthly basis on our systems as part of our continuous monitoring program, and we analyze those reports. We don't just run the scans and say, hey, we check a box, the scans are run. We actually go back and look at those reports and identify what needs to get corrected as a result of that. Another thing you need to put into place are perimeter defenses, such as DDoS and intrusion protection systems. The intrusion protection systems in particular will help you see when these botnets or are trying to attack you, or if one of your systems gets attacked internally, it will see that phone home type of situation, and it will potentially stop it, and it will potentially, if it's in block mode, and it will potentially alert you to the fact that a system has been impacted, and you can go and tackle that system very quickly. Other things that you can use are to use strong access controls, which we already talked about with admin, removing the administrator rights from computers and giving people rights to systems that are less than administrator, or using multi-factor authentication that requires like a something that is in the hand of an individual who's authorized to use that, because that way, if a password gets hacked and somebody's trying to deliberately place a file on a system, they may not be able to gain access to that. So those are some best practices from a hygiene perspective that you need to take a look at. Now, I told you earlier that my friend who got attacked, he was able to recover from his situation in just a couple of hours. And that is because he had good backups that were done on a regular basis. He was able to restore his systems to their pre-attack situation, find the files that were in the time bomb, and remove them before they kicked off again. So of the 4 things that are on this list for recoverability, the ones I want you to focus on are those last 2 about good backups and having a good backup solution, like a disaster recovery as a service type of solution. And one of the things with disaster recovery as a service is it moves your backups to an off-site location. It gets you to a situation where if your entire office or your entire server farm is attacked, you have the ability to take those backups and go to another location with them. So that is really a key after the fact of being attacked. After you've found that you've been attacked, having those backups is a key to recovery. One of the worst forms of recovery, although sometimes you can't avoid it, is actually payment. And the reason I say that that's the worst form is because lots of times people are duped into payment, thinking that they will get their encryption key and they'll be back up online in a couple of hours. Reality is that once you pay your money for these, you will get your encryption key. But almost every single case that I'm aware of, anybody that's paid has found that the encryption key is actually only a partial encryption key. And then you find out that you can get to some of your data, but not all of your data, and that really creates a bigger mess. Payment also continues to encourage the bad behavior on the part of those that are attacking. So if you have to pay, it's understandable. I'm urging you not to pay because of those 2 situations. It creates a sense of continued involvement by these guys because they are getting paid for what they do. But recoverability also has another important feature, and let's end it on end that portion about recoverability on the high note. So we got the backups. The thing we really want to do. We got the thing we really don't want to do with payment. But again, preparing a high note here, preparing for the event before it happens is also key. So understanding, going back to my story about my friend, he was able to pull the plug during the initial event. He was able to pull the plug on his computer that was being attacked very quickly, and that stopped the encryption that was starting to happen on his computer. So he had a good training program in place to detect visually or otherwise by human, detect these types of events happening, and an incident response plan in place that allowed him to pull the plug and shut down his computer to prevent the ransomware from having the impact immediately at that point. Now, yes, he learned a few things from that as well, such as being a little more cautious once he brought his systems back up online because of that time bomb that went off later on. So what's important with this recovery plan that I'm talking about is communicating it with internal and external stakeholders, especially if you have external data centers or external providers. You need to make sure that these are communicated back and forth so that everybody knows what they're going to do. You need to make sure that your audit teams and other types of teams are included in this so that they understand and can validate that your plan is workable. Your audit teams can use their tools to make sure that it fits in and is in line with compliance requirements as well as good practices. Don't ever, ever, ever fall into the thought process that if you've got a plan and you've been tested by an auditor that everything's good. One of the key things that people forget about with these plans is failing to actually conduct a physical restoration process. So walk through the process, actually pretend like a machine has been hit by ransomware and that they need to be restored to their previous clean backup. Do that a couple of times a year. It may take you a couple of hours, but trust me, a couple of hours worth of testing this will save you hours and potentially days worth of recovery by being hit later on if you are hit. So practice it and plan for it. That importance of testing, it also includes testing on the documentation, going down your call trees if you have to, if this thing happens at night, and let's say you've got, some of your support team there, they're 24/7 and it happens, they need to know who to call and they need to know who to wake up. So make sure that your plan is executable, it's written, and that it's been tested. Those are some key things with your recovery plan that you need to look at. And if you don't have that in place right now, now is the time to do that. All right, so what are some of the compliance impacts? We've kind of talked about the auditors being involved and situations like that. Well, some of the compliance impacts are that a lot of people who are attacked by ransomware will try to divert their auditors from being able to find that, being able to know about it, because it's embarrassment and because it also could open up the auditors to start asking questions that none of us want to ask. For example, did your incident response plan work? Or something much worse, such as, was there a breach, and have you gone through that breach notification process? So make sure that you're not trying to divert your auditor's attention away from these things. Have a plan to communicate directly with your auditors. Yes, these types of situations could result in audit failures, depending on the type of audit you're doing. An SSA 18, SOC 1 or SOC 2 audit, it's not going to result in a failure. It may result in a particular control or a set of controls that have exceptions to them. But it could result in an audit failure with HIPAA or PCI, for example, or FedRAMP. So you need to make sure that you understand in advance the risks that a ransomware situation could have on your audit, because God forbid you have a ransomware situation in, let's say, May, and your audit doesn't occur until the next March, and then you have to dredge up all those bad feelings and bad situations again, only to find out that it had a long-lasting impact of failure when you could have addressed it up front, right when it happened, and took care of it. Other compliance impacts is system exposure or failed training situations. So make sure that you're after a situation like this occurs, or even before a situation occurs, that you're doing your scans that I talked about earlier, that you're doing your continuous monitoring, and you're doing your security awareness and training. The other biggest impact probably to compliance is doing the right notifications. So if there is in fact a breach, there are certain laws out there that require you to notify certain entities or persons of these breaches of their data. So make sure that you work with a legal team, that you have a legal counsel on staff or on retainer that could advise you whether or not a breach has occurred or not. So if you don't have a situation in your environment right now where you have a multi-step identification of a security situation like a ransomware, that's probably one of the first things you want to go back and do as part of your documentation, is identify. At DataBank, we have security events, which are situations that maybe look like there's an attack going on, but we're not sure yet. We have security incidents that occur where maybe a security situation did occur. It was an attacker, but there was no negative impact, or the impact didn't occur against data. And then we have a data breach. And keep in mind that the term data breach is a legal term that in certain states and in certain environments will require you to notify these entities, such as in HIPAA, where you have to notify the Department of Health and Human Services when you have a data breach. So those are some compliance impacts. Now, you're probably asking yourselves, okay, these things exist. Where do I go to get help? I'm going to tell you right now, there's a whole bunch of things on this list. You can contact consultants. You can contact your managed services providers like DataBank. But I'm telling you that the best help on this screen right now is the Department of Homeland Security has a website, cisa.gov/ransomware, that has all sorts of detailed information, great documents and publications. This is one of those things where actually the government has really stepped up to the plate and produced great results and great helpful situations, not only for the general public, but also for small, medium-sized, even large-scale businesses. Not only that, I personally know a number of CISA agents or CISA individuals whose entire job is nothing but to act as liaisons between private industry and the government to help people through these types of situations. So those people exist out there. We always joke about a government agent showing up and flashing their badge and saying, "I'm here to help you." Well, these guys really are here to help you. And I would highly recommend that you take them up on that. They will do assessments for you. They will get involved inside of your organization in a very helpful way and help you develop some of the documentation and get over some of the challenges if you're an organization that needs those types of situations. So beyond that, then certainly look towards your managed service providers, look towards security and compliance experts, both on staff as well as other types of guidance, such as consultants that are out there. But go to the DHS CISA website, cisa.gov/ransomware, and look at the plethora of information that they have out there that can help you. All right, so if you're a DataBank customer, or if you're planning on being a DataBank customer or considering being a DataBank customer, I'm here to tell you that a lot of these things I just talked about are part of our ransomware protection program. We have your disaster recovery as a service options where you could take your data and back it up into our environment at an offsite facility and make sure that is protected. A lot of people don't realize that if you use Office 365, you're not really getting backups, and that you need to get a separate backup for Office 365. And DataBank offers those services for you as well. So between the Veeam Cloud Connect, the disaster recovery as a service package, or the backup for Office 365, we've got you covered on the backup stuff alone. Not just, not all, that's not all we do. We also do a lot of other stuff. You can join us as a managed services effort where we will do a robust continuous monitoring program. Right here is a list of all the security controls that you can choose to put on to an infrastructure as a service, platform as a service type of cloud environment at DataBank. I will tell you that in my program at DataBank that I'm responsible for, that continuous monitoring piece is the key. It's the heart of it. That's why it's in the center of our program. We monitor for these types of attacks on a minute-by-minute basis with Sophos Intercept X. That is constantly scanning files that are on systems and files that are coming in and going out of systems. So we're always watching it. And we have other tools as well that will give us indicators of perhaps things that got through. So having that multi-layer defense and continuously monitoring is the key to protection within your organization, whether it's in your office spaces within your four walls, or if you put it inside of a data center. So this is what we can offer for you. So if you have any questions right now, I'd be glad to take it. I'm hoping that there are. If you need to, you can get a hold of me. You can contact us through sales@databank.com, or you can even get a hold of myself at mhoupt@databank.com or ciso@databank.com. I'm happy to have one-on-one direct conversations with you as we move forward. So Christian, do we have any questions that are out there?
Yes, I believe so.
Good.
So the first question I have, it says, I don't know how to start finding the right resource. If you were to advise on one go-to place or resource, what is that?
Great. So this question was probably asked early on in the process. So I'm going to reiterate the importance of going to the DHS CISA website, dhs.gov/ransomware, or the CISA.gov/ransomware. Here, I'll put it back up on the screen so that we can all see that. right here, cisa.gov/ransomware. Reiterate that. That is, in my opinion, that is one of the best resources out there, and it comes from an extremely reputable source. As I said, we joke about the government showing up and saying we're here to help you, but in this case, they really, really are. So what else you have?
Great. Let's see. Next one says, why is there so much ransomware?
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of reasons, and we kind of covered over those a little bit of why there's so much ransomware. The bottom line is that, people are making some money off of ransomware. So there is a lot of ransomware because money is being made. It's the old adage, follow the money trail. And frankly, a lot of that money trail goes over to Eastern Europe. And there's a lot of money that's flowing that direction as a result. The other reason there's ransomware is because it is being used by nation states to attack our systems. Now, when nation states or these advanced persistent threats are using ransomware to attack the systems, quite frequently what they're using it for is to obfuscate a previous attack or to obfuscate an ongoing attack. And what I mean by that is this. They will use ransomware and kind of get us to look in that direction while they're stealing the data over here. They're exfiltrating the data out of a system. So for example, they may attack a couple of workstations inside of a company. And as soon as the attack occurs and they get that notice from their tool that the attack is occurring through that phone home process, they've already attacked a database over here on the other side, and they're starting the move of the data outside of the database at that point. Because when that happens, all the security people and all the people within the organization are focused on trying to deal with the obvious attack that's going on and not watching what's going on the side over here. So a lot of the APT situations are tackling it from that perspective. They're using it as a tool to obfuscate other types of situations. So they're, the money trail and using it as a obfuscation tool. Those are the big ones. All right. What else you have?
Let's see. A couple coming through.
All right. Looks like we have some coming through on our Q&A, right? So
yep.
I can read them off there since I don't. So finding the right resource, we talked about that one, and why so much. Okay. So what do I do to protect against ransomware? Again, we talked about that a little bit. There's what I call the multi-layer defense model in order to protect against ransomware. That's the simple way to say you need to have a lot of tools, a lot of training, and a lot of effort that goes into protecting against this. Or, we could also say it from a simple way. We talked about it earlier in dealing with good hygiene practices. You need to make sure that your systems are patched. You may make sure your people know how to, through training and awareness, know how to be able to identify when these types of situations are occurring and prevent them. When they're trying to be baited into it through phishing or through a PM, a private message, or things like that. So protecting against ransomware is what, good hygiene on your security side, removing your admin rights on computers and hardening your systems, things like that.
Great.
All right.
The next one I have is, what are some key points in my incident response plan to battle ransomware?
Great question. So first of all, you need to probably take a look at a couple of NIST documents, the 800 series documents that I believe 837 is one of them, that will give you some patterns to follow. But inside of your incident response plan, you want to make sure you have call trees. You want to make sure you have action plans in there where people, so the call trees, you need to, people to get a hold of in the event that something like this is happening. And what a lot of people forget about inside their call trees is including external resources. So in our call tree, for example, we have included in there the contact points for our Sophos antivirus product. So if we need to get a hold of Sophos, it's right there at our fingertips to do so. You need to, potentially have, you can even think of it this way. What happens if your electronic lock system on the doors of your office are hit by ransomware and you can't get into the facility? So you need to have a potentially have a locksmith on your call tree, or you need to have the building owner who may have the keys be able to get you into the building on your call tree. So think about those kinds of things that are not obvious that you need to have on your call tree. And then inside of your plan, you need to have an actionable, executable plan for dealing with prevention of ransomware. For example, if you get that first pop-up on your screen that says your computer is starting to be encrypted, what is the immediate action there? Pull the plug, shut it down, get it out of the way. And then what do you do next once that has happened to make sure it didn't spread elsewhere, or make sure that your computer's when you bring it online, it's back online, it's set and squared away. You need to have a containment process. So let's say you've got 3 out of 200 computers inside of your environment that are impacted. How can you contain it so it doesn't spread any further? And how can you detect any future spread of that outside of that containment zone? You need to have a plan for recovery of the situation. So after the hoopla is done, if you will, after you've got a situation where the ransomware has been contained and now you're ready to start figuring out how to get back online, what are the steps necessary to do that, to certify that a computer that had been previously, or a server that had been previously attacked by ransomware, can now be brought back online and brought back to an operational state. And then finally, the thing that everybody always forgets is debrief. Debriefing is one of the key things that I learned when I was in the military, and is key to successful teams, is sitting down and making sure that you've gone back over the situation and that you've been honest about where it failed and where it succeeded, in particular where it failed, so that you can make that better in the future. Make your debriefs and a very honest and open situation without the finger pointing going on. Don't get in there and say so-and-so failed to do their job. Sit there and say that this technology control failed in its actions, and we're going to spin up a new project to go and understand why it failed. Don't make it about a person. Don't make it about a team. Make it about an object. If you're going to talk about failure, or make it about a process. If you're going to make a failure statement, those are key things that you need to do to have in your plan. All right. What else do we have?
Thanks, Mark. Are the attacks really that big for companies? I'm asking because I want to know how much time and effort I need to spend in training my organization.
That's great. So this kind of probably dovetails into, is the media overblowing the attacks that are occurring? So the answer to that is the attacks are occurring within companies. They're occurring every day within companies. Yes, you do hear about them in the media, especially when they have impacts upon large public entities where a number of people are harmed or potentially harmed by the situation. So they do exist. They are big. They can be big. But really, the biggest attacks that have occurred out there are the ones when they shut down the mom and pop companies, and those companies never recover. Because it's not just those small businesses that are out there that have to shut their doors and lay off 10 people or lay off 100 people, which has happened many times. I remember 2 different distinct situations about 2 and 3 years ago where I read about a company in Wisconsin and another company down in Arkansas. The one in Arkansas in particular happened in a November, December timeframe. And the ransomware literally encrypted all the data. One of the companies, I don't remember which one, was a medical device or a medical company of some sort. And people's records were completely lost. They had no way of getting them back and sharing with the hospitals the history of these devices and the recording that they did. And so it wasn't just 100 people or so that were working at that company were impacted. It was the thousands of customers that were impacted and the lost data that went with that. So, these things, those are things that you don't hear about in the news very often unless you're really looking for them. But it does impact companies. And if you don't have a way to recover, if you don't have a DR as a service type of program or the backups that are off site, and you don't have the expert staff to help you, you are going to be, you're going to be in a world of hurt in your company in recovery. So then the next part of that question, is it really worth your time and effort? Yes, it's worth your time and effort. Are you willing to risk your entire company? And I don't want to be over dramatic about it, but are you willing to risk your entire company for a simple training program that could occur a couple of hours a year? A few follow-up emails, a few follow-up testing type of situations, maybe a $5,000 annual output of funds to have an anti-phishing campaign that automatically runs and trains your staff. So think about it. Is $5,000 or $10,000 a year to dedicate towards training too much to prevent something that could shut your business down forever? And unfortunately, a lot of insurance companies will not pay out as much as you think for a business that gets shut down because of this type of thing, because it is preventable and it is defensible. So be prepared and be concerned about that. It is well worth your time.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Last call for questions.
All right.
All right.
If we don't have any other questions, just a reminder, you can get a hold of me at sales@databank.com or ciso@databank.com. I'd be happy to have further conversations with you about this. All right, Christian, all yours.
Thanks so much, Mark. Thank you all for joining us today. We will be hosting more in-person and virtual learning events, so feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, and we will post all upcoming events there. And we look forward to working with you and seeing you in the future.